What happens when Hollywood royalty walks into a morning television studio expecting royal treatment, only to discover that British television hosts don't bow to anyone? In just 33 seconds, a single dismissive comment about working-class backgrounds would transform a routine promotional interview into the most explosive television meltdown in recent memory, leaving one of the world's most famous women storming off set in a fit of rage that would be replayed millions of times across social media. The This Morning studio was buzzing with its usual energy that Tuesday morning. Allison Hammond, beloved by viewers for her infectious laugh and genuine warmth, was preparing for what seemed like another standard celebrity interview. The guest list showed a big name, someone accustomed to red carpets and royal protocols. But Allison had interviewed everyone from Hollywood A-listers to reality TV stars, and she treated them all the same way, with respect, humor, and that distinctive down-to-earth charm that made her one of Britain's most treasured television personalities. The guest arrived with an entourage that seemed excessive for a morning chat show. Assistants, publicists, and handlers filled the green room, creating an atmosphere more suited to a film premiere than a cozy television interview. Allison noticed the commotion but remained focused on her notes, reviewing questions about upcoming projects and charitable work. She had no idea she was about to become the target of an unprecedented on-air attack. As the cameras rolled and the interview began, everything seemed normal. Allison's opening questions were warm and welcoming, designed to put her guest at ease and give viewers insight into upcoming projects. The responses came with practiced precision, clearly rehearsed answers delivered with the kind of polish that comes from years of media training. But beneath the surface, tension was building like pressure in a kettle about to boil. The first sign of trouble came when Allison asked about connecting with everyday people through charitable work. It was an innocent question, the kind asked in hundreds of celebrity interviews. But the response carried an undertone that made Allison's smile falter slightly. There was a dismissive quality, a suggestion that connecting with ordinary people was somehow beneath someone of such elevated status. Allison, ever professional, tried to steer the conversation toward lighter topics. She asked about favorite British traditions, hoping to find common ground and restore the friendly atmosphere that This Morning viewers expected. But instead of warmth, she encountered more condescension. The guest spoke about British culture, as if observing it from a great height. Like an anthropologist studying a curious but inferior civilization, the studio crew began exchanging glances. Even the cameramen, who had seen countless celebrity meltdowns and diva moments, sensed something unusual happening. This was not typical Hollywood arrogance or standard celebrity entitlement. This was something colder, more calculated, and infinitely more personal. Allison's questions became more direct. She asked about adapting to life away from the spotlight, about finding happiness in simpler pleasures. These were softball questions, designed to humanize a celebrity and make them relatable to the audience. But every response seemed to create more distance rather than connection. The guest spoke about ordinary people as if they were a different species entirely, beings to be managed and manipulated rather than understood or respected. The breaking point approached as Allison tried one more time to find common ground. She spoke about her own journey from local radio to national television, about the importance of staying connected to your roots and remembering where you come from. She shared a personal story about growing up in Birmingham, about her family's struggles and triumphs, thinking this vulnerability might encourage similar openness from her guest. Instead, she was met with a look that could freeze fire. The guest's expression shifted from practiced politeness to barely concealed contempt. The mask was slipping, revealing something ugly underneath the carefully constructed public persona. The studio fell silent, except for the hum of equipment and the distant sounds of the production team working in the control room. What happened next would be dissected frame by frame across social media platforms. The guest leaned forward slightly, adopting the posture of someone about to deliver a devastating blow. The words that followed were delivered with surgical precision, designed to cut as deeply as possible. They revealed not just arrogance or entitlement, but a fundamental contempt for the very people who had made This Morning a beloved institution. The attack was personal, vicious, and completely unprovoked. It targeted not just Allison's background, but her entire identity as a working-class woman who had earned her place through talent and determination rather than birth or marriage. The words hung in the air like poison, contaminating the usually warm and welcoming atmosphere of the This Morning studio. Allison's face went through a series of expressions that viewers would later describe as heartbreaking to witness. First came confusion, as if she could not quite believe what she had just heard. Then hurt, deep and genuine, the kind that comes when someone strikes at your most vulnerable place. Finally, something harder settled over her features, the look of a woman who had faced adversity before and would not be broken by it now. The guest seemed to take satisfaction in the reaction, leaning back with a slight smile that suggested this cruelty was intentional. The words that had just been spoken were not a slip of the tongue or a moment of poor judgment. They were a deliberate attack, designed to humiliate and diminish someone whose only crime had been treating a celebrity guest with the same respect she showed everyone else. "I beg your pardon," Allison said, her voice steady despite the shock. The professionalism that had carried her through thousands of interviews kicked in, but underneath you could hear the tremor of someone processing an unexpected assault. The studio audience, usually chatty and engaged, had fallen completely silent. Even the production assistants had stopped moving, sensing that something unprecedented was unfolding. The guest doubled down, apparently mistaking Allison's momentary speechlessness for weakness. More words followed, each one more insulting than the last. References to class, education, and worthiness spilled out like venom from a snake. The attack expanded beyond Allison personally to include her family, her background, and everyone like her who dared to occupy space in media without the proper pedigree. "People like you should know your place," came the most damning phrase of all, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone accustomed to looking down on others. The words echoed through the studio and would later echo through millions of homes as clips of the interview spread across the internet. It was a phrase that revealed everything about the speaker's worldview, a glimpse into a mindset that divided humanity into worthy and unworthy categories. Allison's response came not in words, but in action. She set down her interview cards with deliberate precision, the small sound magnified in the sudden silence. Her movements were controlled, dignified, refusing to give her attacker the satisfaction of seeing her lose composure. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of every working-class person who had ever been told they did not belong. "I think," Allison began, each word carefully chosen, "that this morning has always been about celebrating all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds. That includes the people watching at home, the people working behind these cameras, and yes, the people asking the questions." Her tone remained professional, but steel had entered her voice, the strength of someone who would not be diminished by another person's prejudice. The guest's response revealed just how out of touch they had become with reality. Rather than recognizing the line that had been crossed, they pushed further, making comments about television standards and appropriate representation that would have been shocking in any era but seemed particularly tone-deaf in the modern world. Each word dug the hole deeper, creating a monument to entitlement that would define their public image for years to come. "The viewers of this show," Allison continued, her voice growing stronger, "come from every background imaginable. They are nurses and teachers, shop workers and students, parents trying to make ends meet, and retirees enjoying their mornings. They tune in because they want to see real people having real conversations, not because they want to be lectured about their place in society." The camera operators, following their instincts and training, captured every moment of the exchange. Later analysis would show the guests' increasing agitation as they realized their attack was not having the intended effect. Instead of breaking Allison down, the cruelty seemed to be strengthening her resolve. The Birmingham accent that had been mocked became more pronounced, not from defensiveness, but from pride. "Furthermore," Allison said, rising from her chair with the grace of someone who had decided the conversation was over, "I have spent my entire career treating every guest with respect and kindness, regardless of their background or status. That is what this morning stands for. That is what British television at its best represents. And that is a standard I will not compromise, not for anyone." The guest's face transformed as the reality of the situation began to sink in. This was not going according to plan. The expectation had clearly been that Allison would absorb the abuse quietly, that the power dynamic of celebrity versus television host would keep her in line. Instead, they found themselves facing someone who understood that dignity cannot be taken away, only given away. "I will not sit here," Allison declared, her voice now carrying across the entire studio, "and listen to anyone, no matter who they think they are, insult the hardworking people who make this show possible, or suggest that some human beings are worth less than others because of where they come from or how they speak." The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, everyone present understood they were witnessing something historic. The guest's composure finally cracked completely. What had started as calculated cruelty transformed into raw panic as the reality of their situation became clear. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of what was rapidly becoming a career-defining moment. and not in a good way. The practice media training that had guided them through countless interviews evaporated, replaced by the authentic personality that had been hidden behind layers of public relations polish. "You cannot speak to me this way," the guest sputtered, their voice rising to a pitch that bordered on hysteria. The entitlement that had been simmering beneath the surface now erupted in full view of millions of viewers. "Do you have any idea who I am? Do you understand what I could do to your pathetic little career?" The words tumbled out in a torrent of rage, each threat more desperate than the last. Allison remained standing, her posture straight and dignified, refusing to be intimidated by the escalating tantrum unfolding before her. "I know exactly who you are," she replied with quiet strength. "And more importantly, I know who I am. I am someone who has earned their place through hard work and treating people with respect. That is something no amount of fame or fortune can buy." The guest's face contorted with fury at this response. They had expected submission, groveling, perhaps even an apology for daring to stand up to such an important person. Instead, they found themselves confronted by someone who understood that true authority comes from character, not from celebrity status or royal connections. "This is ridiculous," the guest shrieked, their voice now completely out of control. "I am not going to sit here and be lectured by some nobody from Birmingham who got lucky with a television job. You people need to learn respect for your betters." The mask had not just slipped, it had been completely torn away, revealing the ugly truth underneath. The production team watched in stunned silence as their guest stood up abruptly, knocking over the coffee cup that had been placed carefully on the side table. The brown liquid spread across the white surface like spilled secrets, impossible to clean up or take back. The gesture was symbolic of everything that had gone wrong with this interview, the careful preparation destroyed by uncontrolled emotion. "I am leaving," the guest announced, as if this declaration would somehow restore their dignity. "I will not be disrespected by the hired help on some cheap morning show. My people will be hearing about this, and there will be consequences." The threats continued to flow, each one more empty than the last, the desperate words of someone who had never been challenged before. Allison watched the meltdown with a mixture of sadness and resignation. This was not how she had wanted the interview to go. She took no pleasure in seeing another human being lose control so completely, even one who had attacked her so viciously. "I am sorry you feel that way," she said simply. "The door is behind you." The guest's exit was anything but graceful. They stormed toward the studio exit, their entourage scrambling to keep up while trying to manage the public relations disaster unfolding in real time. Assistants whispered frantically into phones, publicists began crafting damage control statements, and handlers attempted to create a barrier between their client and the cameras that continued to record every second. But the guest was not finished. At the studio door, they turned back for one final assault, their voice carrying across the entire space as they delivered what they clearly believed would be a devastating final blow. "You will regret this," they screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at Allison. "Nobody disrespects me and gets away with it. I will make sure you never work in television again." Allison's response was delivered with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of. "I have been working in television for years because viewers trust me to be honest and authentic. That trust is not something that can be taken away by threats or intimidation. It is earned through consistency and character." The studio door slammed with a sound that echoed through the building, marking the end of the most extraordinary interview in this morning history. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the hum of equipment and the distant sound of raised voices in the corridor. As the guest team tried desperately to contain the situation, Allison returned to her chair with the same dignity she had shown throughout the ordeal. She looked directly into the camera, addressing the viewers who had witnessed this unprecedented display of entitlement and cruelty. "Well," she said with a slight smile that did not quite hide the hurt in her eyes, "that was not exactly what we had planned for this morning." The control room erupted in activity as producers scrambled to figure out how to handle the remaining airtime. But Allison was already moving forward, demonstrating the professionalism that had made her beloved by audiences across Britain. She picked up her interview cards, straightened her shoulders, and prepared to continue with the show, proving that dignity and grace cannot be shaken by the tantrums of those who mistake entitlement for importance. In those final moments before the commercial break, viewers saw everything they needed to know about both participants in this extraordinary confrontation. One had revealed themselves to be everything wrong with celebrity culture, while the other had shown why authentic people will always triumph over artificial ones, no matter how famous or supposedly powerful they might be.